We begin, as we usually do, with an experience. Hours into scrolling, a video catches your eye, and it brings you back to your lost childhood. Your memory seizes upon a time you feel is now long gone, and you experience a deep longing to return to these simpler and happier times. You speak with your parents, with your grandparents, and with strangers on the bus who are much older than you about any number of topics, ranging from politics to culture. And you find that many will always default to a time before, which in their mind was the pinnacle, and everything since then just can't compare. At some point, you begin to see that this is in yourself. And whether it is the exterior design choices taken by McDonald's, which have morphed it from a joyful play place to a beacon of brutalism, or dreaming about your hometown sports team, which is in a constant, unsuccessful rebuilding process but never achieves its past glory, or, again, your favorite band who has never been quite able to top their earlier work. You have found yourself in the middle of the phenomena of nostalgia, a disappointed present and a longed for past. And this video exists to investigate this experience, particularly as it is manifested as a symptom of the temporal paradox laden within the human soul, which has become more and more clear with the advent of the internet and consumer culture. This is the commodification of time and memory. But before I begin waxing poetically about how this electric rat and the industry built around it may actually be a reflection of something deeper within the human person, I must begin with a warning. Any philosophy about time and memory is an immensely mushy and complex thing, of which I myself writing this script have found myself continuously second guessing myself. The reason for this is a quote from a former professor of mine who once shouted at the top of his lungs to our class, "Any philosopher worth a damn will at some point or another encounter the problem of time." And so, with this in mind, I must apologize to you in advance for wasting your time talking about time, but I think we both can take consolation in the fact that it is likely neither you nor me will even remember much of this at all. But at the most bare bones level, it seems that both time and memory function on two levels. The first level of time is what many would conventionally call clock time. This is time as is measured as an observable object of disciplines like physics. We break time into measurable units which help us go about our daily lives. The spinning of the earth around the sun determines how we count years, and this is a simple example. Now, there are many who already go in for a critique of this and challenge that this concept of time is in fact very much culturally constructed and may not even contain a real correspondence with whatever you conceive as the quote unquote outside world. But wherever you fall in this dispute is a non issue for what is present to us right now. We must hold this distinction because the second level of time is one much more personal, and we will call this experiential time, or time considered in a more phenomenological way. This second level of time is not the object of science, but personal experience. An easy example is how one can say that 15 minutes spent at the DMV passes in a different way than 15 minutes spent in the company of good friends. Even if the exact clock time remains the same, the experience and meaning is separated. And in a similar way, we may say that memory has a basic two levels. The first level we hesitantly may call historical. However, this term perhaps needs a bit more clarification, since it is quite loaded. For now, it's perhaps useful to just say that the first level of memory is what most people conceive of as a historical knowledge, the so-called objective facts of what has happened in the past. Much like the first level of time, there are many who object that this cannot be accessed or may not even exist. But for now, we suspend these never-ending fights to address the second level of memory, which is experiential memory. And this is often a memory which either intentionally or unintentionally recalls and instills with a certain degree of meaning personal events. A basic example of the two levels of time and memory at play is working at a desk job. You wake up in the morning at a select time and you head to work for the rest of the day, staring at spreadsheets and checking your email. And perhaps you get a large amount of your work done and head home at the usual shift end. Depending then on the type of work and how satisfying you find it, your time in the office on the second level can either pass quickly or slowly, even if the clock time of your shift remains the same each day. In a similar sense, one can recall on the first level of memory the various tasks one has accomplished in the day, and yet the second level of memory presents itself when a curious friend asks us, "How was work today?" To which we reply, "Boring. I did nothing." Even if the list of tasks accomplished from your 9 to 5 stretches to infinity, the second level of memory will always allow someone to recall that they have still done nothing. Using the distinctions we have made so far, it appears that nostalgia falls under the second level of time and memory. We know that nostalgia wouldn't fall under the first level of time because nobody is nostalgic about a specific date or time on the clock, but rather an event set within that measurement. In a similar way, we know that nostalgia is not the first level of memory, the historical sense, since nostalgia has the curious aspect of coloring in the past with a certain type of longing that may rob the event of its actual real occurrence. Therefore, nostalgia, being in the second level of time and the second level of memory, brings forth a new occurrence, a sort of temporalizing which brings about a melancholy in the present while looking back fondly on the past. This conflation of time, then, builds a sort of resentment, specifically to the present, which then chains into itself, causing the past as remembered to have higher and higher value. A simple example of this is that the more one becomes discontent with their present situation, the more certain memories rear themselves in the mind with deeper and more dramatic meaning than they had previously. In this, our memory and our time become removed from any real grounding. So what we have then seems to correlate with any typical everyday experience. But what can we make of nostalgia considering the advent of the internet, which has proved to be an amplifier for things that go on within the human heart? We can, of course, perhaps imagine various tame versions of nostalgia in our simple experience. The loss of childhood and the moving on towards various tiresome obligations of adult life, of course, will manifest themselves with a longing for the simpler times. This, however, seems to latch itself on to a longing not only for the freedom of childhood, but certain popular objects from the past cultures, which we now use as vehicles to express the dissatisfaction we feel with the present. Cultural objects either function as idols or icons of the past, but the prevalent use of them is typically one driven by monetary gain on the level of those who produce them, and the desire to return to a lost past on those who receive them. Curiously, however, many experience a type of dissatisfaction even with recapitulated nostalgic objects. A quick survey of YouTube will reveal an entire subculture around nostalgic dissatisfaction around everything from Star Wars to jazz music. Furthermore, the proliferation of videos that recount the rise and fall of certain internet influencers, or the rush to declare at every turn the death of everything from Pokemon to philosophy itself, shows forth the stance of critical disappointment constantly levied at the present. This is not to say that all of criticism is just the result of people unable to let go of the past. In fact, we may poetically ask if it is perhaps the past that has refused to let go of people. We perhaps now can be a bit sidetracked by ongoing and never ending discourse over the relevance and value of various cultural items such as movies and TV shows, and whether or not they truly are any better or worse than the things we remember from the past. This, while fascinating, sidesteps the problem of what nostalgia, considered philosophically, reveals about the human person. So let us conclude by looking at Pokemon. The phenomena of Pokemon can be explained through the first level of time and memory, in which we research the various years that the games came out, or how long the TV show ran for. There is then also the second level of time and memory, which introduce to us events that are meaningful. And this is when one discovers Pokemon for the first time as a child, or the various cards one remembers having in their collection and where they kept that collection in their room. And finally, some of the characters we related to most in the TV show. All of these events, which exist on the second level of time and memory, produce a lens of interpretation for the present and make nostalgia possible. This is eventually triggered, now, at least in our popular culture, with the recapitulation of a nostalgic object. One in their past has brought forth a deep attachment to Pikachu. Years down the line, new Pikachu cards are produced and sold. And witnessing this event, one encounters a new, meaningful event, which inevitably has to be compared to the old. This comparison often leads to longing and resentment, and produces itself in sentences such as, Pokemon was great until Generation 5. Regardless of wherever one draws the line between the good Pokemon games of the past and the disappointing present ones, one eventually only increases in their dissatisfaction. There are only so many brand new Pikachu cards that can be released, and eventually, returning to the well so many times will display the transparent monetization of everyone's favorite memory objects. And once this becomes apparent to us, a critical alienation occurs, in which one potentially loses their interest not only in the current Pokemon product, but the past Pokemon product. It is a great tragedy when nostalgia loops against itself and the old memory and old time even become tainted and thrown into doubt. All of this process is manifested materially through your expression of displeasure in something you once loved. But the object, Pokemon in this case, is ultimately rather arbitrary in the grand scheme of experience of the internal contradiction of one's own personhood. How then do we make sense of this? It appears that there is some type of temporal dissatisfaction and loss felt within our condition, and this is expressed in less existentially weighty things, such as the trading card games you used to collect. To gesture at this experience, we look at the writings of the great philosopher Blaise Pascal, who writes, quote, "The greatness of man is great in that he knows himself to be miserable. A tree does not know itself to be miserable. It is then being miserable to know oneself to be miserable. But it is also being great to know that one is miserable. All these same miseries prove man's greatness. They are the miseries of a great lord, of a deposed king." End quote. Nostalgia, then, in its ability to process time, shows us a type of misery, regardless if it's over Pokemon or something else. Within the human soul, something is unsettled. And we end this video as we typically do. The appearance of a paradox, that we are always on the brink of the absurd, and yet we potentially have something open to the totally other who could liberate us from our own contradiction. Are you unable to engage with things you once previously found fun due to overthinking them? Like, subscribe, and wander around your local parking garage.